Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. It is the Boardwalk Historic Designation Task Force meeting. We're live in City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:07 a.m. We'll do the roll call real quick. Frank Cole is absent. Kate McKenzie?
Here.
Dan Parsons?
Here.
Frank? Well, I messed up. Jim Ellison?
Here.
Wayne Neal? Here. Heidi Nastrom Evans?
Here.
Christopher Bright?
Here.
Andrea Hoffman?
Here.
Wesley Combs?
Here.
Mason Pretty?
Here.
Rosemarie Patton?
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills is here. Michael Burton is absent. He's apparently in Japan. And I think we've got all, and what that means is we do have enough voting members here to present a quorum so we can formally conduct business today. Thank you for being here. We're going to start off with approval of minutes. I have extra copies. Does anybody need minutes? There is one mistake that I'd like to point out. That's on page 2, line 132, 133. It's my fault. Apparently there are multiple Paul Laurence Dunbar schools in the country. I wrote down Philadelphia. It's actually Lawrence, Laurence. And so I would change it to Michael Burton, the developer's perspective, the Paul Laurence Dunbar School Complex, Baltimore, Maryland. Are there any other corrections? If not, I would take a motion to approve the minutes with the correction noted.
So moved.
Second? Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the draft minutes in front of us with the corrections I just noted. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And the draft minutes before us with those corrections are approved. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to correspondence, which there is none. Then we're going to move on to old business, which is an overview of task force meeting. That is really just put in here each month for the neophyte or the layperson that hadn't seen us before to remind us that our charge comes from the Board of Commissioners, and we are seeking recognition on the National Register of Historic Places and also the Delaware Public Archives blue markers. And with that, we're going to move right on. And we've got a lot of business today and no members of the public here, so I'm not calling on them right now. With that, we're going to continue with old business, individual presentations, sharing experiences in seeking recognition on the National Register of Historic Places, Delaware Public Archives markers, or other historic acknowledgement, including relevancy to the task force mission, our task force mission. We're going to take it in this order, Andrea, and then Heidi, and then Mason, and then I'd like to offer Jim some time to speak also. One of the things I need to do is keep an eye on timing because we've got, under new business, a lesson on research methodologies that I want to get through today and complete it. And then we want to have a little time to talk about assignments. So anything we don't get to today, we'll certainly carry that over. With that, the floor is yours, Andrea.
Thank you. I guess I'm going to start out with some introductory remarks. I worked on this project when I was 25 and 26. That is a long time ago, okay? That is a very long time ago. However, this was my hometown, and it was my second job out of college. I had worked for a preservation organization in Boston, and when word came out about what was happening in Lowell, I jumped at the opportunity to participate. One thing there are a couple of things I want to say about what I'm going to talk about. The scale of what happened in Lowell is very, very different from the scale that we have here. We live in a 1 square mile city, and we're talking about a boardwalk that's about a mile long. In Lowell, we started out with a locks and canal system that was 5.6 miles long. That was our original, that was the original structure that was presented to become a historic site. So what we ended up with was a 137-acre national park. And this is the story of how something expanded well beyond the initial structure. And I think there are some lessons for us here in how that played out with the National Park Service.
Andrew, can I offer everybody, I have printouts of her presentation. If you want one, raise your hand.
The other thing about Lowell is that this park may be a one-off. I really don't know whether the mechanisms that were used to basically get the preservation that the National Park Service was looking for, those mechanisms were through an easement that was actually authorized by public statute. So this whole experience may be very different from what we're dealing with, but I think there are some lessons to be learned. What you're looking at here is the Merrimack River. And this is a river that begins in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and it flows south and arrives in Massachusetts at a town called Haverhill, which became a major shoe-producing city. Flows further south, passes through Lawrence, Massachusetts, which became cotton mill city, and finally ends up in Lowell, where the Merrimack is then joined by the Concord River, creating a very large flow. And if you look, you can see that there is a large fall. There's a 32-foot drop at this point. This is where, in 1821, Francis Cabot Lowell brought a group of wealthy Bostonians, known as the Boston Associates, to this site. He had recently returned from England, where he toured factories, mill factories, cotton factories, where he toured cotton factories and took note of all of the ways that they were using the equipment, how they were set up. But he was particularly taken and very much influenced by what he saw on the floors, which was young children working, no ventilation, and squalid living conditions for the workers. So Lowell had a very, very different vision for what he wanted to create. He decided that he wanted to create a planned industrial community. So the group ended up purchasing 137 acres along the Merrimack River. Francis Cabot Lowell knew the area, and he knew that there were very few structures in the area that they purchased. But in the outlying areas were many small farms. And his idea was that he was going to offer jobs to young women who lived on the farms and probably wanted to earn some money and maybe get off the farm and have a different kind of a life. And it turns out that he was highly successful. And in fact, until, let me just give you, hang on just a sec, let me show you a couple of things here. This is the same location. It's a couple of miles down. This is what ended up happening in Lowell. I'm just jumping ahead to show you what it looked like. But here, the factories in 1826, so from 21 to 26, Lowell had 8 factories, 5.6 miles of locks and canals, worker housing for the young women, along with, he built 2 churches. So things went swimmingly into the 40s, but by 1845, a number of factories, cotton factories, had moved south, and there was a great deal of competition. And as a result, working conditions declined, and there were new demands put on workers. So around 1840, the women were no longer primarily workers. In 1845, there were a series of strikes, and finally, Lowell was saved in 1845 by the potato famine. A huge number of Irish workers came over and were willing to work for very low wages. From then on, it was waves of immigrants that basically worked in the factories. 1968 rolls around, and well before 1968, basically after World War II, but certainly when electricity became widely used at the turn of the century, Lowell began, the mills began to face competition, and more of them closed. The last one closed in 1968, and the city of Lowell was in bad shape. We had our very own Hell's Angel group that moved in. We had gang wars, we had murders. There were very few jobs around, and it was bad. It was hard times. Around 1968, the city of Lowell decided to apply for a grant called the Model Cities. And this was a grant, Lowell was anything but a model city at this point, so this was basically aspirational. But in, let me just get in 1968, the city won this grant, and what they did was bring together a group of people, churches, nonprofits, the city, and they decided that they needed to think of something. My elementary school teacher and principal turned out to be the leader of this group, and he came up with a big idea. He decided that the route to revitalization was through history, and he used that money to hire some folks to put together a plan for a Lowell State Heritage Park. And if you look at this, this is what's going to become the national park. This is the very beginning. So what you see outlined in black is the canal system. It's 5.6 miles of canals. And I'm going to just tell you what the little markers are. There were 3 ways to enjoy this park. The first was that what you did was you could, well, I guess I've skipped something, and actually I should be with my own notes here, but let me just say that this proposal was based on 2 grants. One was, at the time, there was a lot of money around for clean water. And the Merrimack River, I mentioned to you, had many communities dumping into the Merrimack River. So there was a joke that you could actually walk on the, on the river. And it was our drinking. It was definitely our drinking water. Anyway, they got a lot of money to clean up the river. But they also added to that, through the Massachusetts Historic Preservation Fund, they asked for the locks and the canals to be rehabilitated to work using the techniques of the time. So amazingly, they got quite a bit of money to clean up the river and all of the areas along the river, and they got $10 million from the state of Massachusetts to bring the locks and canals up to working conditions. So this is the park, and what you're looking at is there are 3 ways to access it. You can take a boat ride through the locks and canals. The state decided that they were going to manage this, and they purchased boats so that tourists, the hope was, of course, that we get tourists, and we're certainly providing recreation for residents. So you could ride a boat around it, you could walk it, and there were also bike trails. So this plan was immediately sent to the state, and I got to get my, it was on my time. Did you give me that right now? Just the yellow. Yeah. Sorry about that. This is my. Let's see. In 1974, this was finally established by the state, and in 1975, the governor proposed the locks and canals for National Register status. In addition, in 1975, something else happened that was very, very significant. And that is that Congress actually passed a public law, 9364, authorizing a plan for the preservation, interpretation, and development of the Lowell Canal system to become a district. So Lowell was now told that this was going to become a district. I was hired in 1975 because all of a sudden there was a lot of work to get done. Let me just get my... In 1975, the Park Service showed up. And I want to, this is one thing I did want to talk about. Sorry, I'm not looking at my, unfortunately, I should be. I was struck by water being the starter ingredient for both us in Lowell and for Rehoboth. It was the Merrimack and the Concord Rigorers, and then the canal system that shaped Lowell's culture and development. For Rehoboth, it's the ocean and the boardwalk that shaped the growth and development. And we were considered a cultural landmark. There were some other, we were assigned other criteria, but that one was one of them. So, you know, Rehoboth has a boardwalk, Lowell has a canal system. I'm going to show you now the buildings that the Park Service saw. These are not what the buildings looked like when the Park Service came. I just decided I could not show you pictures of the graffiti and the broken windows. So instead, I'm showing you what these things looked like when they were actually used. And you can see, you can probably date it from the cars. I know my husband could date it, and I don't exactly remember what the date of this picture was. But what I'm showing you now is the boot mill. And myself, I'm sorry. Where's mine? I have not followed. Here we go. The boot mill is owned by the city of Lowell. And it is very similar to what's going on once the national park was put together. It's very similar to what's going to happen to the other buildings that you're going to see. But this is what the Park Service saw when they came in 1979. Right now, it is a multi-use property. It's one of the best preserved of the mills in town. It is not just one mill. I think you can see around it that there are, let me just see if I can get this. I think, whoops, we're going to go back to the boot mill. I think you can see that this is a whole complex. We've got some towers here. There used to be a beautiful clock over here, but this is a massive, massive complex. So we're not talking about just one building. And I think you can see also that these structures are enormous. They're not just enormous, but they're also very, very well built. And despite the fact that they fell into disuse, very few of them were actually taken down because of what the demolition cost. So the infrastructure is really here. So the boot mill is a very good example of how this park is run. You walk in, and there are condos, there are rental apartments, there are shops, and there are offices. But inserted into large parts of this building are visitor exhibits. There are 2 rooms full of working looms, and you can go in and see how the factory floors were laid out, and these looms are working, so you can hear the clack, clack, clack. It's an amazing sound. There are textile exhibits. There are also exhibits of the turbines and the water infrastructure. And all of these sites are open to the public. So there is an easement that is going on here. And by the way, it is the Park Service that takes care of all of the tours and all of the exhibits. And the way this is working is that the arrangement throughout the park, this is the same arrangement everywhere. In return for public access at select locations, the owners got dollars for preservation. And this is going to be repeated throughout this park. So this is really a cooperative endeavor. So next, I'm just going to go through these very quickly, but the same arrangement goes here. This is the Lowell Manufacturing, and this company, and it is privately owned. It is leased to the park, again, an easement. This is their orientation center, and it also there's housing there and there's offices. This is the Suffolk Manufacturing Company, and these are the 3 mills that the Park Service chose. This is Suffolk's, and Suffolk's is owned by the University of Massachusetts. Suffolk's is owned by the University of Massachusetts, and it's part of the University of Massachusetts. This is one of their campuses. And immediately in 1974, when they learned that things were happening in Lowell, they set up this satellite. So it brought the University of Lowell to a very welcoming community that needed something like that. Again, by agreement, this mill actually contains the 1897 Francis Lowell Cabot restored turbines. And finally, well, not finally, but I've got a couple more. This is the housing that the young women lived in. And again, this is private offices, but you can go in and see a typical dorm room. You can see a dining hall, and you can see a library. And the young women, during the time that the young women had set up a monthly newspaper, so you can walk in and see lots of issues of their newspaper in there. And I think the last thing I'm going to show you, Francis Cabot Lowell decided that he also wanted to provide housing for the families of the managers, and this is management housing. And this is today where the Park Service lives. This is their building, although again, it is leased. I think you can see that the Park Service owns very few properties. The whole issue was to keep it private and to buy these easements, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But We knew at the time that there was clearly going to be a canal district and there was clearly going to be a mill district. That was clear. What we were not sure about, oh, I'm sorry, here we go. This is one of my favorite places. This is one of the gatehouses on the canal. And you can get out of your boat and walk through that, or you can walk, you can hike to it, or you can bike to it. So I had to add these. I just wanted to show you that there are the boats on the canals, and here are the canals. The boats, the canals are all handled by the state, and the city takes care of all of the land around it. So that's just, I had to get that in. So what happened? So the state came and said, okay, we're taking the locks and canals. We're going to take the 3 complexes that I showed you. But what was a surprise to us was the downtown district and the civic and commercial areas. That we were not sure was going to occur. But they made a point in selecting this. And it's a point that I think we should take into consideration. And that is that if they had just stuck with the locks and canals and the mills, that would be one story. That's the industrialization. But they were interested in more. They were interested in showing we had a very, very vibrant downtown district. There were 3 gorgeous, beautiful, large stores, just like Woodward and Lothrop or some of the very fancy stores. The downtown was really, really a vibrant place during its heyday. And I'm going to just show you a couple of pictures. This is downtown Lowell, and just a little taste of what it is. If you look over here, this is the Civic Center that they decided this grand Richardsonian thing was built in the 1910s, which is really one of the that's the heyday of Lowell. So they decided to create these 2 districts, and this was somewhat of a surprise to us. Now I'm going to show you, this is the final map of the Lowell National Historic Park. And what I want to point out to you at this point, you see the canal. Here's the canal. All right. This is the Mill District. And it is actually not continuous because they picked up this mill over here. That's where the original turbine was located, so they picked that up. So the park now includes, this is the mill. Right here, this is the downtown. It flows right into the mills. And the Civic Center is right over here. So you can see that the boundaries, there was no question, we didn't have a question about the boundaries of the park. What there was a question about is the buffer. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about what the story is with the districts and how they were run. Lowell was required to set up a historic committee, a commission, and that was one of the things that we were required to do. I want to talk a little bit about any questions on this. It's pretty clear, I think, what's here. This is all city, and this is the district, their district. What you see on the outlying areas is what is known as the buffer. And the buffer, the city is required to protect. Okay. And they did this in a variety of ways, but some of the ways, we have 11 historic districts. And they cover this area and this area and this area. So there are, and it is the city who basically wrote the requirements. this I did want to get to. Okay, so our park contains 137 acres, contained 4 distinct districts. The criteria for the districts are listed here. So concentration of historic resources, geographic divisions. And if I go back and show you that map, the canal runs through the city. It runs through the Civic Center, it runs throughout the city. So geographic divisions were important. Patterns of activities, land use, structures built in response to the development of the textile industry. So within this area, the Park Service was authorized by a second law which went into effect in June of 1978. They were authorized to acquire facade easements to assist private property owners with grants and loans. This is in addition to the tax credits that they are also eligible from the federal government. At the time of this arrangement in 1978, Massachusetts did not have a similar tax credit, but it does today. So I guess I want to get to the last point, which is what I worked on. The Park Service, knowing that this was happening, the Park Service and the city worked with stakeholders beginning really in 1975, 76. This was authorized finally in 1978. So this is actually 10 years in the making, from 68, when Model Cities was discussed, until 1978, when it was finally authorized. Now, a fair amount of work had been done before that. A lot of work had been done before that, but the authorization came by public law. And I will say that the stars were aligned for this project. At the time, Jimmy Carter was the president, and Tip O'Neill, who lived in Boston, was around. Ted Kennedy was around, and the congressman and senator, who later became senator, was Mr. Songas, who lived in Lowell. So they brought home the bacon, okay? We were very, very lucky. Anyway, I'll just talk a little bit about what I did. In 1975, I was hired to work the city did hire a preservation and architectural firm to help. And I was teamed up with the architects and preservation folks from this group. And we did basically an inventory of the downtown, because I was working for this, I was hired by the city. So we did an inventory, we walked and we spent hours and hours. And this was in preparation, really, for going to the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, of course, were the downtown. There were residents downtown, but there were, a lot of commercial people. And we spent a very long time picking out the buildings that we thought we would like to see renovated, rehabbed, and then meeting with the owners and talking with them. And I've given, who has the books? Oh. I wrote, this was distributed pretty widely and was one of the tools that, so I was the author of this. I did not do any of the drawings. I have no drawing ability. But this was handed out, and we showed people. We did mock-ups of the kinds of rehabs that they would be eligible for. And I have to say, Lowell looks very, very different People really, really responded. And I come back now to the meeting that I missed last month, the question of why, you know. In Lowell, we were all in because we wanted to be revitalized. We wanted to make our city better. And that was the secret sauce. So I could describe the easements, but basically, yeah, I'm not going to. Basically, there was a preservation. The federal government got a promise of preservation, and in return, the park got public access. So,
Right. Beautiful. Wesley?
Today, what is the status of the, does it still look the same? Is the park still in
Fabulous.
existence?
fabulous, fabulous.
So they
It brought the
stayed-
city back.
You can still take the boats? I went and looked it up.
Yeah. Oh, please, if you drive up to Vermont, you know, Massachusetts, through Massachusetts, if you go north to Maine or anything, absolutely. By the way, the locks and canals got landmark status. They were elevated. So it is a wonderful, wonderful park. And it's definitely worth the trip. Yeah.
Andrea, I just wanted to make a comment. Back in the 90s, mid-90s, I was involved in a program in Boston, and I was met by a coworker, and she said, before we do anything, I have to show you where I live. And she took me to Lowell, and we walked all around, and she gave me the history that you just did.
Oh, my gosh.
And so, I mean, what an amazing transition.
It saved us. I mean, there's just no question. And this was, you know, I went through this because I cared. I really, really, really did. And it brought back some good memories. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Very good job. Excellent.
I have a question.
Wayne?
You set the stage for a lot of historic preservation certifications to happen.
Yes.
Was there an umbrella Department of Interior also certification? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
There was a commission, the first public law that was passed that said you need to have a plan. I told the city that, one, they had to have their own historic preservation committee, but there was a committee set up, an umbrella, that absolutely,
Would it reflect this board, for instance?
yeah.
Thank you.
Heidi? You're next.
Okay.
Does anybody need Heidi's printout? Anybody here? All three? One,
Is that the one that was on the,
2, 3.
I do it?
oh, no, this one, okay.
Are you,
At least
are
I'm
you
doing
doing?
it
Okay, you're
front and
doing.
back.
I did want to mention before I start my presentation that when I used to teach history of design, there were these two pictures that I would put next to each other when we were getting to the beginning of modern design. And one was of Lowell, and it was a factory set in an agrarian setting, and it was very utopian, and it was this idea that would lead to modern design, like reductive, clean line design. And the other was a factory, it was an iron foundry, and it was at night, and it was spewing flames, and it was the opposite vision of industrialization that, you know, people like William Morris and John Ruskin were writing about. We needed to go back to hand craftsmanship because these working conditions were so bad. But that image of Lowell was from 1832, and I could get it for you. So my presentation is about what a Georgetown church can teach us about the Boardwalk. Lessons from the Prospect AME Church National Register nomination for the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk Cultural Landscape nomination. A short history about Prospect AME Church. It's located in Georgetown, Delaware. It was listed on the National Register at a local level in 2023, nominated under Criterion A for ethnic heritage, fulfilling Black history, social history, and religion, and the period of significance was designated between 1866 and 1956. On the left, you'll see that it has a blue historic marker, and the research that went towards this historic marker was very significant. It was done by Russ McCabe, who was then the state archivist, who had access to a lot of materials, and we used his research when we did our nomination application because it was just so well done. On the right is an image from Frank Zebley's Churches of Delaware, showing the church in 1936. The church does not look like this at all anymore. And it dates to a much earlier period. You can see on the blue historic marker that the trustees got the land in 1839, and Moses Robinson was the first preacher for what was there. The church on the right was not built until 1866. So there was a big span of time between acquiring the land and building this specific church. There may have been an earlier building there, but we don't know about it. So 2 nominations, 1 playbook. Both properties faced the same core problem. How do you argue for national significance when the physical fabric alone won't carry the case? On the left, Criterion A, the significance, was with the association that this building had with important historic events and patterns. Integrity is judged by the location, the setting, the feeling, and association, not the physical fabric, because over time, the church changed dramatically, and I'll show you pictures of what it looks like today in a few minutes. For the Boardwalk, Criterion C, design, and for Prospect AME Church design, the architectural or artistic distinction won't carry the our nomination application because there aren't the materials, the original materials aren't intact. So neither property retains its original materials, which rules out Criterion C in the National Register nomination approach. But both retain their historic location, setting, and association, the foundation of a Criterion A case. So what am I saying here? On the left, for Prospect AME Church, the congregation was founded in 1839. The church was built in 1866-67, following the Civil War, when there was national money dedicated. Many Black churches were built at that time. The building has been heavily altered over time. There's little original fabric, but we built a case on documented continuity of use, community, and association, not the materials. And in our case, that continuity of use is very important as well. For the Boardwalk, in the orange box on the right, continuous use for recreation and community life since 1873, rebuilt repeatedly after storms, even though no original boards remain. The state's prior review found that there was no architectural integrity, but that was, as we've discussed at length, not the right test for this resource. The task force is building the case now, and Emily Whaley is going to be our state contact, and she was our state contact for the Prospect AME Church nomination. So here are some images of the church. On the left is the earliest image of the church we have from 1936, but it's still quite a long time after it was built in 1866, but it does give you an idea of what it originally looks like, whereas on the right in 2022, that's what it looked like when they started raising money to restore the church because its foundation became destabilized. I included the image below the two exterior images to show you what we discovered when we pulled back the floorboards, which made Emily Whaley very excited because it's something that was done often in Sussex County, which was reusing much earlier materials. So those floorboards she could see were 18th century floorboards that had been taken from an older building and reused when they first built the church. Okay, so our situation with the Boardwalk is that the Boardwalk's boards have all been replaced, but its location, setting, and role in the community life have not changed much since 1873. The winning argument, 4 aspects, not 7, looking at the National Register's criterion for significance and integrity. We have location, and here I'm talking about Prospect AME Church. The location had remained in the same tract of land that was conveyed to the trustees in 1840. The setting became part of the incorporated town of Georgetown in 1863. The character of surroundings were retained. The feeling, it continues to evoke reverence as a house of worship in continuous use since 1866, and association, which, this is one of the most important Black churches in the world, probably because of its direct contact with Richard Allen, who founded the AME Church. Richard Allen, when he was raising money to buy his freedom, he had been enslaved up near Dover. He would harvest salt at Cape Henlopen and take it back up the Lewis Canal. And that's where he met Peter Lewis in Lewis, Delaware, and Moses Robinson, who was part of that congregation too. And Peter Lewis and Moses Robinson became the AME preachers in the Sussex County circuit, it was called. So trying to connect it with the Boardwalk, our task force is already using this framework for the Boardwalk. And this slide is showing that this approach has worked for other nomination applications. So building the case without a building, Prospect AME's bibliography ran to 30 plus sources. None were architectural, nearly all were documentary. We had land and legal records, deeds, Delaware land records, Sussex County Recorder of Deeds, historic maps, the Pomeroy and Beers Atlas, Gray's Railroad map, Sanborn fire insurance maps from 1910 and 1919. We used historic newspapers and periodicals such as the Christian Recorder, the Milford Chronicle, the Cape Gazette, and census records and oral history and agency records. So the U.S. Federal Population Census, oral histories such as Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy. Brian Stevenson went to Prospect AME Church as a child, and he grew up in Milton, and he became a famous civil rights attorney. They made a movie about him not that long ago, Just Mercy, which I think really, even though our period of significance didn't go beyond the 50s, the importance of the continuous use of this church and its continued association with the struggle for civil rights over all that time was so significant that I think it really helped our nomination. From research to essays. The essays that made up our nomination application are mapped out here. And I'm looking forward to us writing a history of the Boardwalk. Similarly, and Emily Whaley really guided what essays we researched and wrote once we got her on board. But what we included were early AME activities in Georgetown, members of the Prospect AME Church. Prospect AME Church was the first school for African American children in Georgetown, the development of the town of Georgetown, Georgetown's African American community, the formation of the AME Church by Richard Allen, who's pictured on the right, 20th century Georgetown, school named after Richard Allen, which is located very close, the nearby DuPont School, which is now a community center. There's no mistake that it's so closely located to the Prospect AME Church. We had an oral history perspective from Brian Stevenson and excerpts from the Christian Recorder, which were important. And community voice is primary evidence, so we're going to do this too, where we're going to seek oral histories from local people that commemorate the importance of the Boardwalk to our community. And here's a picture of Brian Stevenson with Reverend Janet Mull Martin, who's the Reverend of Prospect AME Church, and he's been helping with fundraising to restore the church as well. So our next step is to keep collecting stories from longtime vendors, lifeguards, Boardwalk merchants, residents, the same way Prospect AME built its association case, one voice at a time. So applying this to our task force, we submit the schematic to Emily Whaley for state feedback, which is our next concrete deliverable. We get state input before we go further. Then we finish the 4 integrity write-ups on location, setting, feeling, association. We build the documentary bibliography using town plats, Sanborn maps, newspaper archives, postcard collections, organized by category. We keep gathering oral histories, and we source illustrations, historic photographs, and maps to complete our own photo log and figure set. And so then after submission, we submit the completed nomination to the state. We defend it before the state's review committee that Jim Ellison once sat upon. And he will be able to help us with that part of the process. And if the committee approves it, the nomination moves forward to the National Register of Historic Places for federal listing. And I just wanted to end by saying it's a very lengthy but rewarding process. And once we've done all this work for the historic marker and the National Register nomination, I hope our next step is to turn it into an exhibit hosted by the Rehoboth Beach Museum. And on the screen there is a picture when we went up and defended our application at the state level and found out a while later, I can't remember how long it takes once the state approves it, it goes on to the federal level. But if the state approves it, you know, there's a pretty good chance that it will be accepted on the federal level. But that was a happy day for us back on August 23rd, 2023. So what, 3 years ago? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. You mentioned one of our next concrete steps is the schematic, short for planning schematic, and just repeating for our public that's listening in and for us, a reminder that the planning schematic is a precursor to the registration form, which is the formal name for the application for the National Register. And that's a precursor so that we get feedback directly from the state on whether we're headed in the right direction or not. So, very good. Any questions for Heidi? Wesley?
So on the 5 things that you list in the, is this are they concurrent steps, or do we have to complete each step before the next step? So as the mayor just indicated, if we're going to submit the schematic to get feedback, do we want to start, do we start these other steps in case we get feedback that says we shouldn't move forward? So I'm just trying to understand the timeline of those.
Well, we'll get the schematic done, submit it, and I would suggest that we just continue our work.
And what is there, I can't remember if there's a timeline for when that schematic is supposed to, how long that's going to take to.
I don't think it will take very long. I gave us a handout on the readings that Emily Whaley gave us, which basically would fulfill the schematic back a while ago. So I was hoping once we form our committees, we'll sit down and we'll look at that handout as a starting point for the schematic to see, now that we're all sort of on the same playing field in terms of our awareness of the process, if what we want to turn in as a group.
Thank you.
I guess we haven't received any information from Emily or the state indicating how long it would take to review the planning schematic. My guess, though, is that there's gonna be some flexibility to it. We'll submit something, they'll give us feedback, we'll resubmit something and come back and forth. Unlike the post office where we had Main Street in recently, where they indicated, you know, they went right to the registration form or application, and it's being acted on, and that's a 60 to 90-day time frame or something. So to answer your question, I don't think we have any time frame for that yet. Any questions for Heidi? Wayne?
Yes. I'm wondering if your contacts would help us in our homework by asking them if they know of similar cases that have been approved previously, and are they available to us, and what are the ingredients of those that we might be able to use?
Well, that's a good introduction to Mason's presentation, because that's what he focused on, right?
Right, but I wasn't planning, that's not today, is it?
Well, we're going to have you do Tiber Island, then we're going to look at time frame. I'm most anxious to see your boardwalk things, but we have to look at time frames. So let's do Tiber Island. And then Jim wants to make a few comments. And then let's leave time for the research project here, seminar on research methodologies. And then we'll see where we are in this, if that's all right. But
Sounds good. What I had done was gone through the 5 similar boardwalks throughout the country and their process and how they receive national recognition. So that's what we have to look forward to. But this one is on Tiber Island, where I spend part of my time between Lewis, Delaware, and Washington, D.C., in an area called development called Tiber Island. Let's see, is this pulled up?
does anybody want one of his handouts? Everybody?
Yes.
Big one. I'm gonna have you a second.
Just one? Oh, just one. Do you want one? I want one. You get one. There you go. Give that Kate.
I have,
Good. Good.
You have one for Rosemary?
yeah, I've got 'em over here.
Right.
You know Tiber Island, don't you, Wes?
You kept saying that, I was like, I know what that is.
So those of you who might not know me, I've been slowly but surely getting to know a lot of you, but my name is Mason Preddy, and again, I spend part of my time in DC at Tiber Island and here in Lewis. I've had a recent fire in the cooperative development, and that's just turned into a complete nightmare, but I won't focus on that. So what makes Tiber Island significant? It was part of the nation's first major urban renewal undertaking and considered a model for urban residential development across the country. The broader development of Southwest Washington also included work by I.M. Pei all around that, who was a famous architect. It was an award-winning example of mid-century modern architecture. I added for all the architects part of the group by Keyes, Lethbridge, and Condon, and was completed in 1965. In 1966, it received an American Institute of Architects Honor Award and was named by Fortune magazine as one of the 10 best buildings in the US. I double-checked on that because I thought, wow, that's quite an honor. It's combined of 4 residential towers, 85 townhouses around a central landscape plaza, the Grand Lawn, which is still called that, which is, I think, kind of cool, the Grand Lawn, an innovative approach that separated pedestrians from vehicles by placing them, the parking garage beneath the plaza, which is apparently a new kind of thing back then. It was an early example of condominium ownership and modern cooperative community living. It incorporated the Thomas Law House, a rare federal period residence constructed between 1794 and 1796, and already individually listed in the National Register. The Thomas Law House became known as the Honeymoon House after Thomas Law and his bride, Eliza Park Custis, Martha Washington's granddaughter, lived there following their 1796 marriage. So the Board of Directors recognized the importance of formally documenting and protecting the community's historic significance. It considered the potential impact of the massive wharf redevelopment plan for the adjacent southwest waterfront. It directed that a committee be formed to explore historic designation. I was asked to serve on that committee. And we went from concern to an organized action. The wharf was coming. This was huge. A sweeping redevelopment was planned immediately beside Tabor Island, transforming nearly 1 mile of waterfront. The wharf ultimately has become a $3.6 billion total redevelopment value, 3.5 million square feet of mixed-use development, 1,500 residences, 4 hotels with 821 rooms, 300,000 square feet of restaurant and retail space, 1 million square feet of office space, 3 live music venues, including the 6,000-person soundproof Anthem. And I'll tell you, I laid in bed sometimes and I swear it wasn't soundproof. There's 4 public piers, extensive parks, promenades, and waterfront spaces. The wharf was not one new building, it was the construction of an entirely new waterfront neighborhood. Here's a picture. It was one thing that was interesting about it is that it's backloading. So if you were to jump over these buildings here from the water, that's M Street Southwest. M Street Northwest is where famous Georgetown is. And everybody used to always think, oh, you live in Georgetown. No, I lived in Southwest, which was different. But so there's a lot of traffic because there's no place for the Ubers or the delivery trucks to park or deliver with this setup. The case for the historic designation. The cooperative retained architectural historian and preservation consultant Peter Sefton to guide this process and prepare the formal nomination. I remembered at one of our last meetings, a lot of you all had used a firm name, was it Korn? This was our Korn person. Do you all remember that? The architects in the room? Okay.
The other firm was Kai's Condon in Florence.
Kai's.
You said Keys.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the committee helped assemble historic records, original plans, photographs, architectural publications, awards, information about the development of Southwest Washington. That's where I kind of sat in the scheme of things. The consultant evaluated the property's architectural integrity and documented its buildings, landscape, development, history, and relationship to the Thomas Law House. This research was organized into a formal nomination establishing why Tabor Island met the criteria for historic designation. The completed application was submitted to the District of Columbia Historic Preservation Office. The DC Historic Preservation Office reviewed the nomination for completeness and evaluated Tabor Island under the district's historic designation criteria. The public notice was issued and the nomination was scheduled for consideration by the Historic Preservation Review Board. The Historic Preservation Office staff prepared a report and a recommendation for the review board. The Historic Preservation Review Board conducted a public hearing and considered the nomination, supporting evidence and public testimony. On May 24th, 2012, the board voted 8-1 to designate, and I always wondered, what was that one guy thinking? To designate Tabor Island as a historic landmark. Tabor Island was entered into the District of Columbia Inventory of Historic Sites. The board also requested that the State Historic Preservation Officer forward the nomination to the National Register of Historic Places. Following its approval of the local designation, the DC Historic Preservation Review Board requested that the State Historic Preservation Officer forward the Tabor Island nomination to the National Register of Historic Places. The nomination was submitted for federal review by the National Park Service. The National Register evaluated Tabor Island's documented architectural, community planning, and development significance. And on January 14th, 2013, Tabor Island was officially listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So the local recognition opened the door to the national recognition, which I think we did not begin again with an entirely new national application. The research and nomination assembled for the district became the foundation for the National Register review. That is an important lesson for Rehoboth. One well-prepared nomination can support both levels of recognition. Here were some lessons. Historic designation begins with a committed governing body with a clearly defined purpose. Community knowledge is essential, but professional preservation expertise helps translate that history into a persuasive technical nomination. A successful application must document significance, not simply age. And I continued to come across that with the other boardwalks that I've researched. Architecture, community planning, cultural history, landscape, and lived experience can all contribute to the case for designation. One thoroughly researched nomination can provide the foundation for both local and national register review. Strong documentation, public support, and a clear historical narrative are critical to success. The process begins by identifying what makes a place worth preserving. That experience led me to ask an important question for Rehoboth Beach. How have other communities demonstrated that a boardwalk is historically significant, not just by age, but by its significance?
And that's where I think we need to take a pause, if you don't mind. I'm more interested in this than or very interested in that. But let's take a pause, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
We'll get to it either later today or most likely at the next meeting. Jim, you wanted to say a few things, and then I wanted to make sure we left enough time for the research methodologies next. So,
Did anybody have any questions for
yes.
me?
Any questions for Mason?
Thank
That's
you.
very interesting. You solved the question for me. Where in the world is Tabor Island? I thought it was down near Sanibel or something. Yeah.
Why is it called Tabor Island? That is a question. Why is it?
It's named after a place somewhere overseas.
But it's not an island, that's no island of, I looked at the aerial view, there's no, it's not a structure.
No, it doesn't, I don't think, have to do with like the Potomac or anything, but I'll get a distinct answer for that.
Are these boardwalks going to have historic
Wayne,
preservation certifications?
This boardwalk is not what I was talking about. This was a development where I live, Tybor Island. It's a co-op community. So I don't know what the plans are with the wharf.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, just a couple of comments on that. The wharf is an entirely new, huge development. Yes, the waterfront is still there, but everything else is totally new, an amazing development. Tybor Island is actually in a much quieter area and behind, and sort of to the side of what you saw there. Much quieter neighborhood. The Thomas Law house is just astounding. You all ought to visit it if you're in D.C. Relative to my comments, they really relate more to your 5 examples. I think you took a really excellent approach to see what has been said about other boardwalks, because obviously most boardwalks have either been replaced 1,000 times or, whatever. So I'll hold those comments, if it's all right, until you get back to that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Interestingly, my front or back door, there's 2 doors, or in each end of the building, now backs up to that boardwalk. So I can spring out of my front or back door and be right there in the boardwalk. So it's not as quiet as it used to be.
Very good. Christopher?
So, do you have any recollection, were the developers behind the wharf project interested in your work for the historic designation nearby, or not involved at all, or?
I think the feelings that I had and remembering back, it was that we didn't know what to expect from this big behemoth, these developers coming in and were doing the best job that we could do within our reach to protect what we had.
What did they think about it? Did they help you at all? Or
No.
were they hostile to you?
No.
They just help.
No, I'll tell you an interesting story. I bought my unit and there was a lot of development going on at the time before the wharf even came. A new Safeway and City Hall there and all kinds of things like that. And I had a beautiful view of the Capitol Dome, and every day this building, the simple Safeway building, took it away. And I came to these meetings, and it was interesting. The developer, the architect, I said, this is my view. And they said, well, Mr. Preddy, views go away. So that particular developer,
Historic designation, was the wharf developers involved or engaged at all in this?
I don't remember either way.
What year was the Tybor Island designation given?
2013.
The project was halfway done by that point, right? The wharf the first phase had been built by that point or not?
Yeah, that went through many stop and goes. At one point, they didn't know who owned the property, which stopped construction for a little bit. There were a lot of different things there.
But a historic designation law, as I understand it, requires a nearby developer to anticipate if something nearby might be prospectively designated. So even if it wasn't designated yet, they might have had some obligation or some interest in.
That's a very good point, and I was not serving on the board of directors at Tiber Island at the time. There might have been other things going on that I wasn't familiar with.
All right, we're going to move on to research methodologies. Obviously, at some point, we need to do research and figure out how we're going to do it, how we're going to archive it, and the different methodologies. So we've got Christopher Bright, Heidi, and Daniel that are going to give.
I jumped up on my first.
Go ahead.
Let me just let everybody know what we're doing. In your handout from today, attached to the agenda, you'll find part of it relates to what we're going to do right now. It's the part that's called Boardwalk, National Register of Historic Places Data Collection Workshop. And Christopher, Dan Parsons, and I drafted this to help give you an idea of the type of research we're going to do. So on the first page of that, which is page 4 of the overall agenda handout, there we've put individuals into groups, but we're not going to talk about that right now. If you go on to page 5, it talks about the research guide, what we need and why, and there again, I'm breaking things down into the criteria that the National Register is looking for by significance and integrity, ending by saying that the first concrete task we're going to have is the nomination schematic. So then page 6 is where we get to the presentations that you're about to see from Christopher, Dan, and myself about some of the resources we're going to be using in our own research for when we're doing the Blue Historic Markers and the National Register application. Below where I wrote what we're each talking about, I've listed some primary sources and secondary sources that are going to be useful to us that will be placed in a repository that we're going to create. And we're going to have a repository team, ideally including Frank Cole, Wesley Combs, Christopher Bright, and me as the coordinator. And that repository will be available online for everybody to access. So right now, we're going to do the presentations. I guess Christopher was ready to go, so he's going to tell us about research opportunities through the Library of Congress and the Delaware Public Archives, both online and in person, followed by Dan, who's going to talk about NAB Center resources at Salisbury University and the importance of oral histories. And then I'm going to talk specifically about what we have at the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society.
Thank you. You're up, Christopher. Noted on this sheet, it says photographer, ? Jim reached out to me and offered, but we can have multiple people work too. That's why this is so important. How do we collect this information and then archive it? Christopher, go ahead.
Okay, so as Heidi said, I was tasked with reviewing and giving a quick kind of lesson about how we might access a very important newspaper repository that the Library of Congress runs, which is very helpful, I think, to our project and is very relatively easy to use. So the Library of Congress has digitized millions of pages of thousands of historic U.S. newspapers through 1962. We're interested in gathering information from those newspapers about the Boardwalk from approximately 1873 to about 1986, if you go back 50 years. And I think that, well, I don't think, I know that that topic was well covered in the newspapers in the collection, particularly those newspapers from Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, starting about 1873. And that is on this major database that the Library of Congress runs called Chronicling America. And I will send this presentation out to you later so that you can have the various links and so forth. But this is what the Chronicling America webpage looks like. These are the newspapers that are relevant to us in the Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland area, which again have coverage of Boardwalk-related topics. This is an alphabetical list. Again, you can look through this yourself, but it gives you an idea that it's not just the major newspapers that you're familiar with, but sometimes very small, short-run publications. This is an alphabetical list of the Delaware papers, so it's not inclusive, but just an example of the sorts of things that, the sorts of sources that are covered. Now, a caution, I've spent the last 2 weeks on this project. I've been in this database before for another project, but I've spent the last 2 weeks in this database for this project, and it's tedious sometimes, it's slow, you need a good connection because of the massive data that's being transmitted. But look, it beats, I've done this also, it beats going to the archives and poring over hard copies of newspapers or microfilm of every page of newspapers also, which are not word searchable. So there are some drawbacks, but a lot to commend this particular project. Again, this is the website. I'll send this around. You go to it, you get a page that looks like this. In this case, I've inserted the word Rehoboth in the search bar, chosen Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania as the states. Chosen a date range, in this example, January 1st of 1873. For the purpose of our argument here, I put 1900 as the end date, no particular reason to necessarily do that. You hit search, you get a list that looks something like this. You see that there's 5,000 some hits that are yielded. Again, that's a broad search, the word Rehoboth in 3 states over almost 25 years. But it gives you an idea. This is the photographic image almost, as the large see here on the top, and then a rough summary of what the topic is and the specific citation beneath it in blue. So again, 5,000 some hits. The best thing to do though is go to this. I don't know why you have to do this separately, but this sorts by date range and we'll reorganize it by oldest to newest, which reading it chronologically is much easier than not reading it chronologically. So I suggest that those searching put them then in chronological order. So here's an example, the first hit that uses the first hit in the 3-state search for the word Rehoboth in Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania newspaper is a January 7th, 1873 article. This is when you click on that image of the newspaper, you get a very small image there. You see here the word Rehoboth is in red. You go to the increase magnification symbol to the right. You blow it up, and here you see it. I think this is either a fair or something having to do with the junction of Breakwater Railroad and when it comes to Rehoboth. Again, interesting, not related to the Boardwalk, at least as I'm defining our purpose of our research, but my point is I use that as an illustration of a hit you get, in this case, not particularly relevant. We'll go to the next one, January 18th, 1873. There's the page. There's our red symbol of the word Rehoboth. We blow it up, and, oops, sorry. Okay, it's talking about the Camp Meeting Association meeting. Again, interesting, not directly relevant to our discussion of the Boardwalk. Again, you go back, you page through each one of these, go to the next page. In this instance, you know, laborious but helpful. You can whip through them reasonably quickly. We come to this one in April 1875. Here's 2 days later, a couple weeks later. Then you get to this one, May 6th, 1875, where it talks about a meeting of the Improvement Committee of the Rehoboth something or other. That seems potentially relevant. We go to the page, see the red, blow it up, and it talks about resolving to extend the boardwalk now built between the Surf House and Rehoboth Avenue to a pavilion which will soon be erected. So the first reference of the word boardwalk in these newspapers, again, we have a source limited to our sources, but in this particular example, the report is that the boardwalk already exists in some fashion. It's partly built, and now there is a discussion that we might extend the boardwalk. So we want to save this. It seems like an important, evidentiary piece. So over here in the corner of the page is a little scissors, a little hard to see, but I've highlighted it there. You click that, and then you can circumscribe the article that we want. You see that there's lines around the edges. You click Clip Image, and you have now saved on a separate page just that piece that you want. And helpfully, the citation is above it, the date, the newspaper that it came from, and a hot link so you can go back to it. So again, we've searched for a word, found something, looked through a lot of things that aren't relevant, found something that appears to be relevant, and we're saving it now for posterity and for our colleagues to make use of. Again, there's the citation, a hot link, and we can print this page. And now I would suggest that we print the page in this example and have a hard copy for our files. The next step I would propose is that we create, Wes and others and I are working on this, a Google document. In this example, maybe called Boardwalk Facts. It summarized the fact that we found this article that says the boardwalk was partly built between Surf House and Rehoboth Avenue by May of 1875. You put a footnote in. You go back to the page that you saved, you copy it, and paste in your hot link. So now we have a document available to all of us that's got a factoid when the boardwalk was partly built and a source of where we get to that factoid. And anyone that can come along there on our Google Drive, for example, and click on that link if they want to read the evidentiary basis of our assertion that the boardwalk was partly built between the Surf House and Rehoboth Avenue by May of 1875. Oh, sorry, yes, question?
So when you say that link in that, when you go back to that link will take us to the big page, right? Not to that little clip
That's
thing.
correct. But I think it's highlighted with a little
Yeah.
red, so you can find
I
it
just
again.
wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that when, after cutting it out.
Correct, it does not take you back to the, correct, it does not take you back to the cutout, yes.
Could you have put in Rehoboth Boardwalk?
I'm going to get to that. Yes, there's a trick to that, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Welcome to historical research, of course. So again, thank you for that question, but hold that thought. So again, I spent as I said, spent the last 2 weeks doing this. So you pour through each one of these laboriously, plowing through these. Here's another one, April 6th, so almost a year later, April 6th, 1876. Here's our page. There's our red. We blow it up. And it says that the boardwalk is a plank walk, 7 feet wide and it's to be extended from the Surf House down to the Bright's house, the new hotel.
Where is the surf, what was the surf house?
It's a very, where the Open Hotel is, approximately. So again, we would click in the upper right-hand corner, draw our box around it, create our page, print it out, add a footnote, add in, now that the plank walk is 7 feet wide.
May I just add that the Bright House was where Funland is?
And may I add that I'm not related to the Bright
No,
House.
the Surf House was close to where Henlopen Hotel is.
Yeah, sorry.
Boardwalk at that point was from there to
Funland.
Fun.
Because the Bright House was where Funland was. It was a hotel where they permitted dancing and I think maybe drinking, and that was a big problem with the Methodist Camp Meeting Association.
Is that why they called it Funland?
Well, no, but when Paul Lovett talks about Bill Bright, he calls him the original sinner. It was the beginning of the end, very early on.
So, all true. Again, to go back to my research discussion, so if we have this article from a year later talking about the boardwalk being extended, one could return to our Google document, insert the factoid that you found now that it's being extended, it's 7 feet wide, there's plans to further extend it, add a footnote in, cut and paste the citation information from what we found previously, add it in there. Now you've got again, your fact sheet has grown by 2 facts with the appropriate citations, both for someone to read it, and if one needs to, for some reason, investigate the original source or query the original source, you can click on the hot link and gather whatever information you need. So you notice here that as was pointed out, I searched the phrase Rehoboth. You could also do boardwalk as 2 words, boardwalk as a single word, plank walk. I mean, this is the challenge, right? If it's referred to in the newspapers as a plank walk, promenade is another phrase that's used. Each of those have got to be used. You have to search each of those separately. So there is some challenge to it. Again, it's better than paging through the papers individually, but so there are some biases and some challenges with using the database, that you're using the proper phraseology, spelling it properly, 1 word or 2 words, because you'll yield different answers depending upon how you query the database. Similarly, the start and end dates matter. I put in some random dates, as I said. Presumably, when we proceed further, we'll divvy it up, maybe so each of us have a certain period, but each of these variables introduces some challenges or some complexities. So here's an example. Again, I ran Rehoboth Boardwalk within 10 words of each other. I, again, chose some random dates. It was essentially, 20 years? Yielded 25 hits. Here is an example. Committee on Repairs is instructed to complete the new work needed on the boardwalk and elsewhere. The Rehoboth Boardwalk has been undermined, bulkheads and pavilions have been washed away. Years later, 3 years after that, that a new boardwalk 16 feet wide and near the ocean is a possibility. The present boardwalk, only 8 feet, is widest and very dilapidated. This is 1900. Kind of repeats the same sort of information. Later that year, a new boardwalk proposed 3 times as wide as the present temporary promenade. Now a new boardwalk the length of the town. Last year the boardwalk was partially completed, and we're going to finish the work. This was for the mayor's benefit. Gas will be used on the streets and the boardwalk. There's a dispute between gas and electric lighting. So that gives you an idea of the sorts of things that are out there and how we might query this database and record it, with the caution, as I said, that you have to judiciously use both your search terms, and then when you have certain results yielded, you've got to be very careful in wading through, in some cases, as I said, 5,000 results to see what's relevant to our discussions and what is an important reference but less relevant to discussing how the boardwalk has persistently been a focus of recreation, economics, and cultural and community activities, aside from the physical structure. Are there questions about querying our...
Chris?
I have some questions, Christopher. I noticed that most of the papers that were coming up with hits seemed to be from either Wilmington or North Delaware, and I think newspapers.com yields sources that are more local. Did you notice if there were any more local sources in this database?
There were quite a few from Georgetown,
Okay,
Milton, and Salisbury.
great, thanks.
What was the paper of record for here at that time? Was there one?
I can't remember right now.
That's it depends upon the decade. Some newspapers lasted 4 or 5 years, so that's a complicated question to answer, I think. It's also curious, as I said, the extent to which, for instance, Colchester, Maryland, the Eastern Shore covered things Rehoboth.
Oh, look, in this handout I gave you is a source from an article by, it's on the bottom of page 6, the Rehoboth Beach Tittle Tattle from June 1912, an article by William Tremper Tappan, and in that article is where they mention that the boardwalk was first built in 1873. So that article is from 1912, but that's what Paul Lovett uses as his source for the origin of the boardwalk in 1873. So that's a local paper, and I'm not sure where he got it.
Again, this is a rudimentary question of historiography and choosing sources and weighing the sources. And you're right, you're limited to, there's a bias built into the sources that you can access what is left on the table. There is a element of judgment and weighing in all this. I mean, there are variabilities baked into this. We have to acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out when the first boardwalk was built, and I mean that's a question we can turn to for further. But this is an illustration of how to use and weigh sources and what's available to us, and how to weigh it against other sources.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was just going to say,
Kate?
to copy with tittle tattle, my understanding after looking through a lot of the different histories from the VIA, that was where Miss Patan had dinner and served mashed potatoes. It's the kind of things that, with her meatloaf, that would be in there. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Gossip.
I mean, yeah.
Which is good. I mean, there's an advantage to that level of granularity and
I don't think she had mashed potatoes and meatloaf. I just made that up.
Nice souvenir.
Thank you, Christopher. Who's next? Dan, you're next. All right. Does anybody have time constraints where they need to leave? It would be nice to finish this topic at least, and thank you.
Oh, sorry. I have to operate this myself. So I won't take too much time. I just wanted to, let's see. Just talk to you briefly about what I anticipate for the oral history project. And I guess determining the goal of the project. I'm going to need everyone's help with this. For my information, we're conducting preliminary research right now, and I guess who is doing the project? Is there anyone else that would like to help with the oral history project besides me? Okay. You, okay. So there you go.
I might be interested.
All right, so, and just getting, so in the geographic area, we're doing the boardwalk, the partners, the town. I guess the county is helping in regards to my salary. And if we're going to involve the university, I usually work with Salisbury University, University of Delaware. We have to determine the scope, the number of people we want to interview. For the projects that I've been doing, we've just around 10, but we can do as many as you like, depending on how many people there are available and what we want to focus on. When will it begin and end? I won't have time to start. I'm doing an oral history project on Georgetown in the next 2 or 3 weeks for Return Day for their 250th anniversary. So we're doing a story map. So again, the goal and the scope of the project will determine what we do and how we do it. So if the nomination, we're going to do the schematic. By the time we get the nomination going, I want to include the interviews in the nomination. We have to determine, once I do the interviews, then we can get the transcripts, and people need to review them to see what we want to take out of them. Is that going to be part of the history committee as well, to determine what we use from the oral histories?
Once we establish the committee working on it, we can work together as a team under your direction to figure out which oral histories are critical. Just a little heads up is that there are a number of oral histories at the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, and they are
Do you have a list of them?
yes, I have a list of them. There's over 100 of them,
Right.
and they're searchable. So you can find out if they talk about the boardwalk in them, even if it's not in their keywords, which are also listed.
So everyone we interview is going to be about the boardwalk, and that's basically it. Their memories of the boardwalk, to kind of paint this collage of everybody's memories and how it affected them. And that will be the themes that we develop. So again, outcome, we're doing a nomination. If we want to do documentary later for posterity, depending if we want to do video and audio, we have to determine all this, and then collecting photographs. We're going to be scanning in whatever people can bring us and collecting manuscripts. The thing about release forms, we'll have to develop a certain release form because I was talking about this earlier. A lot of the folklorists at Salisbury University, for example, did multiple oral histories during the 1970s, but they can't be used at all because they didn't have any release forms. Where are we going to conduct the interviews, the scheduling, logistics, and you're going to involve the media. We're going to highlight the people and places. I'm just saying that's, and I just wanted to talk about my approach to oral history from Columbia University. That's the first academic oral history program in the country, Alan Nevins. And then I worked with the American Folklife Center. It was created in '76. In 2003, I participated in their Folklife Field School and the National Folk Festival. They kind of incorporated all that into the festival. And I taught oral history and historic preservation for 3 years, and I used the books from Donald Ritchie. He was the oral historian for U.S. Congress. I was introduced to him through my friends John and Linda Farron. John did a book on Justice Rutledge, and then Linda did 300 interviews for women in the American bar, and I enlisted their help for projects. And then I used history of oral history and methodology from professors at Baylor and Emory. Oral history is pretty much everywhere now, but it was and that's what I was talking about, the noted oral historians. Again, I was looking at Harlan County, Kentucky. Anyway, since I've been here, I've done about a dozen oral histories, and I've incorporated them into several National Register nominations, including the Richard Allen School, the cold storage building in Rabbits Ferry School. Anyway, so that again, my point is that the fabric of the community has changed so much, so the people's memories are what help preserve it. And I wanted to talk about the Edward H. Knabb Center for Delmarva History and Culture at Salisbury University briefly. I worked with them because they have all the records from Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia together in one place. So and I left my list of, so I guess Heidi sent me on the task of looking for Paul Marsh, records for Paul Marsh. And
A separate project, but thank you, Dan.
yeah, well, the origin story of Rehoboth. So we're trying to get back to the beginning, and one way to look at it, it was all interconnected. So for that project, I found that Captain Marsh, from going to the Knabb Center, he had land on the Pocomoke River and Wycomico River in 1672, and then he got land here near Lewis in 1682, I believe. But he was a captain in the Maryland militia. And I guess in 1672, Horkill was raided by Thomas Jones. And it could be that Paul Marsh was one of the raiders that raided Horkill in 1872. Anyway, all that information is at the Knabb Center. That's where I reposit all my stuff. They have genealogies, African American history through their website, Enduring Connections. They've been entering in data on African Americans throughout the peninsula for three years, interns doing that, so they have a wonderful website. And then their archives, they have a complete list of all their archives online. Much of it's searchable now. But and they have graduate students that process all their information. So it's not just an archive where things sit. It's a place where students get to use the materials and create new history, and they have 5 exhibit spaces. And they have opened the Museum of Eastern Shore Culture in downtown Salisbury. They have over 500 oral histories already there, and their goal is to preserve, share the rich history and culture of Delmarva Peninsula, regardless of the boundaries. And what in digging into the history of this area, it's really the no man's land and the kind of rivalries between the Lord proprietors. This is a story unique to us. And we can at least encapsulate it in its infancy here. So we're going to be talking about research, but at the Knabb Center, I have the president of the Knabb board, Michael Hitch. He's comprised a lot of the records for land that was Pennsylvania, that's now Maryland, et cetera, back and forth. So he has a database he's created. So and then archaeologist Ed Otter, Dr. Otter, he's done a lot of the land research, and we're just, I'll help out in any way I can, but when we start the oral history project, I am going to ask for lists of names of people to contact. Thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you very much. Wesley?
I was recently at the African American Museum of History and Culture, the one and they have a ton of archives there, and I was thinking I don't know if they have a searchable database themselves, because they did such a huge collection of African American history and culture that there might be something related to this region that they may have information about that might be useful. I don't know.
Certainly. So the University of Delaware is I was going to show you the Enduring Connections website at Salisbury University.
When I did my Prospect AME Church research, Dan introduced me to the Enduring Connections project, and it's amazing. You can search the census records locally and find, who was free, who was enslaved. Well, I guess you could only really find the free.
So that's the thing about the records. So a lot, if the slaves are property, so a lot of the manumissions and et cetera go through the Recorder of Deeds office.
Right.
So
It was so much great information there.
again, yeah, so this is just an example of what they've been doing. I am working with the University of Delaware too. They've gotten a grant to digitize African American history. Anyway, how it connects to what we're doing, it's going to be like Dr. Bright when we're going through. We'll just have to sift through it, but we're going to leave no rock unturned, I guess. Anyway, any other?
Very good. Any other questions?
So I want to say at the NAB, there's the transcriptions of all the records. They have volunteers that transcribe the records. They have the orphans court records, wills, probate, deeds, surveys, assessment records, marriage licenses, sheriff dockets. Yeah, so it's all there. I found that Marsh came to St. Mary's in 1665, and then he came over here. And anyway, all that at the NAB.
Dan is referring to another project that we're working on together about the Marsh family, and Peter Marsh built the homestead up at Rehoboth Art League in 1743, and Rehoboth Beach Historical Society is partnering with Rehoboth Art League on an exhibit that will take place at the same time. They're going to cover the Peter Marsh house period, 1743 and on, and they gave me the hard part of researching the earlier period and figuring out who the origin Marsh is. And the scholarship on the subject is it points to two different people. One was a Paul Marsh, one was a Peter Marsh. So I'm thinking that the exhibit that we're going to do is going to talk about how the research doesn't agree. And that might be interesting to people to just show how history is made.
Yeah, I'm here to help.
Thank you, Dan. Heidi?
Okay. Sorry, Wayne.
Tall. Okay. So my part was to talk about what we have here in town at the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, starting with our oral history collection. We have 105 oral histories in the collection. 27 of them, if you search them, the searchable transcriptions include the term boardwalk, but only as a keyword. And I noticed, and I'll show you a little bit later, when I looked at Dorothy Truitt, who was the mom of the president of our board, Roger Truitt, I looked at her oral history, and boardwalk isn't a keyword on her transcription, but she says it quite a few times in her oral history, which is interesting. So they're worth searching even if it's not in the keywords. Most are audio recordings with searchable transcriptions. 12 are edited into beautiful video compilations by Rob Waters, who does a lot of work locally, really is a good filmmaker. And then there are full-length recordings with searchable transcriptions, and I have a drive that has quite a few of them, but I think a lot of them are on CDs. So that's a bit of a challenge to get some, a computer that can read them at this point. So what this means for our research is searching Boardwalk across the collection already surfaces firsthand, decade-spanning accounts of the Boardwalk's role in community life, exactly the kind of evidence that supports the feeling and association aspects of our integrity argument, and then task force expertise, Dan Parsons. So in addition to what we're doing here, we really want to grow our oral history collection. I'm impressed that we have 105 in our small museum, and they're really beautifully done, but it would be wonderful if we could grow the collection through this project. So I was taking a look through what we had and looked at Dorothy Truitt, since that's our board president's mom, and searched the word boardwalk, and this was just one example of what I found. She wrote down that everybody that went on the boardwalk in those days, it was like you were going to church. You dressed up. So you didn't just roll in your bathing suit and a cover-up. There were very distinct cultural ways of performing or being on the boardwalk. And Dorothy Truitt's accounts come from the 1930s. Why It Matters, a firsthand personal account of the boardwalk's social role decades before the 1962 storm. That's direct evidence of continuity, of feeling and association, and I think I said that already. Here is a link to one of Rob Lowe's video compilations that I just wanted to show you a little bit of it. This is Kitty Cole's oral history, and Kitty Cole was a child here in the 1930s, so she saw a lot. Let's see if I can get this thing to...
Put it into presentation mode.
Oh, forgot to do that. Where is that?
You missed it right there, right above it.
Where?
The little thing at the top of the bar, right? Up. Chris.
There. Okay, thanks. Hey. What is that? Skip for, I'm going to skip that. So and just show you a little bit of this.
Here's what comes off a bowl of strawberries when you drop this device in the water. These berries are fresh from the store and already rinsed under the tap, but within 10 minutes, the water changes color. What floats to the surface will change how you feed your family. My friend works...
My name's Kitty Cole, and I was born in Georgetown, Delaware. And the date was July 7, 1923. It's a long time ago.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little bit how your parents came to the area?
Well, my father lived in Georgetown. He was raised in Georgetown, and my mother was born in Snow Hill, Maryland. And when she came to Georgetown to visit her sister, she met my father. And eventually they were married. And I was born in Georgetown, and he worked on the railroad, on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Mm-hmm. So from there we moved to Harrington when I was about 1. And I lived there for 13 years until I was 13. Then my mother and father bought a place in Rehoboth. Mm-hmm. And we moved to Rehoboth, and I went to high school in Rehoboth.
And before you go on, could I just ask you to give us the names of your father and mother? Mm-hmm.
So you can see how lovely it is. And these are on YouTube also, so you can search for it if you wanted to watch a little bit more. But they're really wonderfully done by Rob. Not all of our oral histories, he didn't do all of them he turned about 12 of them into videos. But we had a program at the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society on Snyder's Candy Store, and I got a call on the telephone from somebody who I found out was Kitty Cole later, and she said, I bet you don't not have anybody in the audience that was there in 1936 when they first opened, and she was. So she came to the presentation. I mean, she's just a wonderful person. Okay, so moving on from oral histories, we also have transcriptions of the city commissioner meeting minutes from 1892 through 1941. 1892 through 1941 are fully transcribed and searchable. They were done by Sandy Neverett, who's, doesn't get any smarter than Sandy. The VIA ladies, I'm sure, know her. She did a great job. But we also have photocopies of the original records, like the one you can see on the right of the screen, through 1989. And because they're PDFs, they're kind of searchable too. And so the difference between looking at Sandy's transcriptions and the original notes is that Sandy has gone through and transcribed them, not word for word, but making highlights. So if you want more detail, you can look at both. But I would definitely refer also to the handwritten notes if we're looking for something specific. More that we have to research we have a wonderful historic postcard collection. I was going through our collections catalog just to find hits on the Boardwalk, and I came up with this relic from the SS Thomas Tracy from 1944, which is mounted on a block from the Boardwalk. So a World War II period relic mounted on a block from the Boardwalk in our collection, and also this charming postcard on the left of the Boardwalk by moonlight, which you can see dollies, in the upper left corner there. That's really nice postcard. And we have things like paintings. This is Dana Pyle, who was related to Howard Pyle, the illustrator from early in the 20th century. But what Dana Pyle painted here, the painting is from 2005, but it's of a historic postcard. So you see how people were certainly dressed up in this on the Boardwalk. You can see that the Boardwalk is separated from Surf Avenue, which still existed to the left, by these, I don't know what you'd call it, but it was put there in case there was a storm that it wouldn't wash everything away. But that didn't help, because that red building down the way in the image is Horns Pavilion, which eventually got washed away by the 1914 storm. So this image is supposed to be pre-1914, and you could see Horns Pavilion was on this pier that went out into the Atlantic Ocean, and they finally gave up on rebuilding it in 1914.
What part of the Boardwalk is?
It was at the tip of Rehoboth Avenue, and it had a carousel on it, and there were stores in there where you could buy mementos. There was a photography booth. It was really an amazing place. And just an aside, at our most recent beach ball, which was just the other week, and Mayor Mills came to that, thank you, we honored the Horn family, and Judge Jim Horn was there, and his family. So his family still is local. They recently gave us this wonderful historic photo collection that was done by Charles Solomon Horn, and I think that was his grandfather. Oh,
Do we have oral histories from the Horns?
yes, there are oral histories from the Horns, but there may be more Horns to get oral histories from. But I think Judge Jim Horn, there is an oral history by him. Here's from our historic sign collection, not a great picture. I pulled it off of our collections database, but the Boardwalk 5 and 10. And here's an image from by Charles Solomon Horn from the Horn family collection. We had a intern this summer from University of Delaware who was preserving the photographs that had been in Judge Horn's garage for decades, but good thing he held on to them, but they were all curled up, and so she sort of steamed them out or humidified them so they could straighten out. But you can see, I'm not sure of the date on this photo, but this is of the Boardwalk at some period. We could figure it out maybe based on this structure on the left, and it looks like rooms to something is on the left there as well. I know there was a place on the beach where you could get, change your clothes and things like that. That might be that location. And it would be interesting to find out if these are gas or, probably gas at that point. What?
One of our articles talks about they voted on gas for electric. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, so we can put all of this information together that we're finding in the historic newspapers with this wonderful documentary photographs. Yeah, and whatever we find out, I would hope that we would add it to our collections database because, when our intern was adding descriptions, she was not an expert on Rehoboth, so she did the best she could, but hopefully we'll get more and more information so that we know more about what is pictured here and in the other photographs from the Horn collection. And that's it for Rehoboth Beach Historical Society for now. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Next on the agenda mentions new assignments. On the back of the sheet that we handed out that has a data collection workshop, there are, in fact, the very back sheet, it suggests that at our next meeting in September, that we could have a lesson on the repository and submissions and master bibliography that we could, and there's some topics, subtopics listed there also for September, October. Bring up that topic about tax credit incentives. Admittedly, I don't know what that means, and so I would like to know what that means. And so I'm suggesting Michael Burton and Wayne Neal with Heidi work on that. Public relations, controlling the narrative. Wesley, you brought that up at one of the last meeting we had. And we thought maybe you and Michael Burton and Heidi could work on something like that. I've already collected public comments that the previous Boardwalk and Beach Committee has received from some of the public member on skepticism over, what comes with the historic designation, and does it negatively impact owners. So I think that's an excellent topic. So I think Heidi and I will confer a little bit on planning in the next agenda, and then be in touch with those that we want to do some extra homework and give you as much time as you need. With that, good of the order, is there any further task force comments? Anybody? Andrea?
I just have a question. Have we settled on what is the boardwalk?
No, we have not, and that will be one of our next,
Okay.
probably one of our next questions
Okay.
to ask. Wesley?
In terms of the schedule for the rest of the year, I just was looking out and noticed that in November, the Tuesday is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So I was just curious if we've set the dates for the rest of the year for all the meetings so that we make sure we have them on the calendar.
We will plan to do that at the next meeting too. Good point. We'll keep looking. It seems that this works.
The next one's Christmas Eve. That's true. That's the one in November.
Seems that the fourth Tuesday of the month works for
22nd.
everybody. Also, the 9 to 11, is there anybody that would entertain, let's just standardize the meetings and go to 11:30, or should we still target a 2-hour meeting?
I think target a 2-hour meeting. if
Okay.
possible.
Okay. Just if you have flexibility while you're here. I hate continuing a meeting if people are leaving. So we'll stick with 2 hours the best we can. Anybody else go to the order? No? Citizen comment? No members of the public are here, but we did ask for it, and we will review future meeting dates at our next meeting, get on the calendar. And with that, no further business. I adjourn this meeting at 11:23 p.m. AM.